Israel live with Saudi enrichment, domestic enrichment? With American guarantees?
Yeah, I think the theory would be, look, Iran is enriching. It's the theory. It is inevitable that the Saudis, Emiratis, others say, wait a minute, we're American allies, so we can't and your enemies can? So the theory would be, if it's going to happen sooner or later, let's see if it can happen in a context that provides more protection for Israel. And then there's the defense treaty part, the other thing the Saudis apparently want. Again, what does it mean? A couple of years ago, there was an attack on Abqaiq, the main Saudi facility for exporting oil. Well, what does it mean? If the Iranians do that again, does the United States have to strike Iran? I think these are very complex matters, and remember, for a treaty, you need 67 votes in the Senate. It's a lot of votes. So I think I can be proved wrong, in a week. It's always very dangerous to make a prediction that can be proved wrong so quickly, but I think it unlikely, and I actually don't see it. I see normalization with Saudi Arabia as being obviously a great thing for Israel.
Right.
But this combination of defense treaties, I do not see as being a good thing.
Ruth, a former member of the IDF General Staff.
I want to add another aspect to what Elliott said. Yes, the deal with Saudi Arabia, if it materializes, and if it comes, we are looking down a very long road with very difficult complexities. But I want to bring our attention to something which, for me, is directly connected to the topic of our panel. Israel, Jewish democratic state, and we are again overlooking the immediate problem which is at our border, which is the Palestinian. Again, we will reach another chapter in the history of the State of Israel that somebody is paying something to the Palestinian for them to be quiet. Whether the dilemma that we stand in front of Israel is the exact dilemma, these days, stop 30 years to the Oslo Agreement, and we can, some of the architects are here with us, and we can discuss whether this was a good thing or a bad thing. But the strategic dilemma that Rabin, may he rest in peace, was looking at is the exact strategic dilemma that we are looking at, which is, if we want to continue and be a democratic and a Jewish state on all levels, then we need some sort of separation. Call it a state, call it an autonomy, call it a 100% or 50%. But we need some sort of a two-state solution in one paradigm or another. But this is the only paradigm that will help us continue to be democratic and Jewish state for the years to come. And I'm sorry that we are not dealing with this right now.
I agree with you on the need that for the country definitely to make some serious decisions, and that's something that sadly consecutive governments have avoided. But Dennis, I want to get your input on Saudi. The Palestinian track we know is stuck. Terrorism here is on the rise. Settlement construction is also on the rise, whether it's the right thing or the wrong thing, but we know how it's perceived by the Democratic administration currently in the U.S. What's your prognosis of normalization with Saudi Arabia?
I actually put it, I'm more optimistic than Elliott is. I agree with him that it's complicated, but I also think that the administration badly wants it. I think the Saudis, interestingly enough, also are quite serious about wanting it. And I think actually it relates to the issue that Ruth was raising. If you look at where we are between the Israelis and the Palestinians right now, there is like no prospect of any movement whatsoever. And obviously things are getting worse. The irony is that the Saudis will make the Palestinian issue part of the overall agreement, not because they're focused on the Palestinians per se, But because from MBS's standpoint, when he does this, it has to look different than the UAE. When he does this, there has to be something that draws others, like Indonesia, Malaysia, to follow suit. And it means that there has to be something for the Palestinians, not a state right now, because it's not possible. If you had a Palestinian state right now, it would be a failed state. But something that changes the realities on the ground in a significant way, and something that also doesn't preclude a two-state outcome. So it means there has to be a variety of practical approaches. There has to be a variety of issues connected to no annexation, but no creeping annexation. And this reality, ironically, creates a moment to unfreeze the situation with the Palestinians, not to end the conflict, because that's not possible now, but to transform it. So for me, there's an irony that if you produce this agreement, this breakthrough between Saudi Arabia and Israel, brokered by the U.S., it will create a challenge for the current Israeli government. When I see Smotrich say there'll be no gestures to the Palestinians as part of a deal, there absolutely will be, or there won't be a deal. And again, not because the Saudis are preoccupied with it per se, but because they have their own reasons to want to show they did something. And so here I see the potential for unfreezing the situation with Palestinians, not solving it, but unfreezing it, and potentially moving it in a different direction. So I'm hoping it'll take place, because if the moment is lost, I don't know what's going to change things. I see them on a pathway to deteriorate further and further.
Well, soon we'll be joined by former Defense Minister Benny Gantz. Maybe he's the solution to all of Israel's troubles, and we'll be able to ask him. But Stuart, I want to get your view for a moment of another issue, but first just on the Saudi issue. You know, you spoke with a lot of emotion before about one of the more radical changes that this government is looking to do. This would be a big gift from the Biden administration to Netanyahu, to the prime minister. Based on what you're seeing, you're feeling, should Biden be doing this for Netanyahu? Because it would give him a massive boost.
Right now, the president is concerned about his own reelection more than he is about the prime minister's reelection. And this would be an enormous achievement, but more significant, it would really end once and for all the Middle East conflict. It would really embed Israel, as the Abraham Accords have begun to do, and Trump deserves credit for that, more fully. Getting the Saudis, who are after all the guardians of Mecca and Medina, on board, getting the Wahhabi influence out. Remember that almost every single person who participated in the 9/11 attacks was a Saudi. This would be an enormous achievement. It would transform the Middle East, and it's worth the sacrifice. It's something the administration very much wants to do. Jake Sullivan, who's the National Security Advisor, has gone to Saudi several times. He's been briefing Democratic senators. So it does have all the hurdles that Elliott mentioned, but these are all ones that can be overcome if there's a political will to do it. But to go back to Dennis's, this is a triangular issue. And even if there is an agreement between Saudi Arabia and the United States for enrichment, for security treaty, the other piece of it is that the Prime Minister of Israel, Bibi, has to make a politically existential decision. Is it worth his legacy? And it would be a major legacy to have normalization at the expense of his coalition, because there's no way the coalition would stay together with Ben-Zvir and Smotrich.
So on politics, I wanted to ask you, there have been a lot of ideas over the years to involve diaspora Jews in the decision-making process here in Israel. What do you make of some of these ideas? Maybe that's a way to, give honorary representation in the Knesset, create something like a sounding board for the president. is this something that Israel should advance?
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that I think there should be, on the part of the Israeli government through its Ministry of Diaspora Affairs, a diaspora impact statement on any legislation that would have a direct impact, like, for example, ending the grandfather clause. There should be, but constructing a situation in which the diaspora is somehow directly involved in decision-making, even on those issues, would be nearly impossible. Who would represent the diaspora? I mean, right now, J Street has spent years trying to get into the Conference of Presidents of American Jewish Organizations. Half of American Jewry is unaffiliated with any synagogue or any organization. How would you deal with the Reform and Conservative and Orthodox community? Who would elect them? All of these are almost insurmountable hurdles, but there are major organizations that cut across at least the organized Jewish community. There's the North American Jewish Federation movement, which represents hundreds of federations across the United States. There's the Conference of Presidents of major Jewish organizations. There's the International Association of Jewish Jurists. There are organizations with whom the Israeli government should be in touch when they deal with it.
JFNA's Israel representative is here with us, Becky Caspi, so she's hearing what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, JFNA is as representative of American Jewry as any, but even there, it's a very diverse organization. And to start electing people to a council or let alone observer status really would cause more divisions than it would solve. But Israel should not get off on the cheap. It simply, and there is legislation that's been proposed by Yankelovich, the previous minister, a bill that would actually simply not involve but have the right to involve the diaspora in at least being heard. So there I think it is important that there be a effort by the Israeli government to use these organizations as sounding boards.
Right. Ruth, I want to shift gears.
Before you shift, may I address
Please.
that? I think that one of the big challenges that we have is to bring home to the Israelis the importance of the dialogue on every decision, dialogue with the Jewish diaspora, that every decision and every legislation that is taking place here in Israel affects the Jewish people at large. And in a sense, the fact that we are, the mandate that we got, the raison d'etre of the State of Israel, is being the Jewish homeland, the homeland for the Jewish people. That means that we have to take this into consideration. And I think that for most Israelis, unfortunately, we don't know enough, we don't care enough, and it's not enough to have a minister or a ministry with that. Maybe we should think about a sort of an upper house, a Senate, a presidential committee where the Jewish people will be represented.
So I do have to ask, because it's not the elephant in the room, but it's the signs that were in the room. Elliott here came under, people are protesting outside because a diaspora Jew, who's the chairman of an organization, is in their eyes involved in something that they don't think is a diaspora Jewish organization should be involved. So I'll push back on that idea to you, Ruth, and then Elliott, I want you to weigh in on that as well.
It's a sort of a dialogue. I was happy to see that. I was happy. I was happy to see.
Adoni.
I was happy to see, I'm sorry, Elliott, about that, but the fact that the democratic civil society of Israel have something to say, and it's saying it even in this room, I think that that's the beginning of a realization that what Israel does affects Jewish communities, and what Jewish leaders are doing affects Israel. It's a beginning. That's not the way I would like to see it. I would like to see it more productive. But I think that this is a beginning.
Okay. Look, let me just add one other thing. When I was ambassador to the European Union, my late wife and I went to all the European countries, and you could always identify the synagogues and day schools because they had armed guards outside. And we always said, thank God we live in the United States and we don't have to worry about it. Now, I can tell you that every Shabbat, it'll happen on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, every major synagogue in the United States of America will have police. Many will have metal detectors. They have exit plans that Federation has been supporting, JFNA. This is transformative. And to the extent that the radical right here is engaging the kind of conduct only feeds this problem. It leads to greater efforts to sanction Israel. It leads to greater threats to American Jewry. So I think that it's very important that the Israeli government understand the impact of what it does if it really wants to be not just a Jewish state, but the state of the Jewish people.
Okay. Elliott, you want to respond to that?
Thanks. You will not be shocked that I'm a little less positive about the demonstration. I'm a little less positive about it in part because it's based on a lie that was told in Haaretz that the Tikvah fund, which I chair, is financing Kohelet. That is simply false. And all this is public information. So the fact that people are willing to show up, to make noise, to do banners without checking the public records to see the facts, this is not helpful to public debate in Israel. Now, you know how.
Please, sir.
Here is the.
Let's let Elliott finish his remarks, please.
The problem on representation of, let's say, American Jews. Half of American Jews have never been to Israel. The figure rises and falls. You know, it's 45%, it's 53%, half more or less. It's not for lack of money. Many of the people who've never been to Israel have been to Paris, been to London. It's a lack of interest. Should those American Jews be represented here? Do they have the right to be represented in Israel's internal decisions if they lack the interest even once to come visit Israel? So I think it's impractical, and I think if we talk about a Jewish and democratic state, a state of the Jewish people does have, I think, to be governed by the people who live in it, who defend it, who pay taxes here, who vote here. That's not to disagree at all with the notion that the government of Israel should pay attention to what diaspora Jews think and to the impact on diaspora Jews of decisions that are made here. I don't think that the debate being held here is the explanation for the rise in anti-Semitism in the United States, or the rise, at least, of anti-Semitic acts in the United States. It's complicated. I don't think I know the answer for why. I would argue that probably President Trump deserves some of the blame for this, for the nature of the debate in the United States. But I don't think it's the Israeli debate that has really contributed to that.
Dennis, one of the things, I mean, already if we're talking on the Israel-U.S. relationship again, or diaspora relations when it comes to judicial reform, one of the comments that's often said by members of the Israeli government is to the Biden administration, this is a domestic issue, back off, right? This has nothing to do with U.S.-Israel relations. This has nothing to do with foreign policy. We're rebalancing our own separation of powers. But Biden hasn't backed off. Why is that?
I think he hasn't backed off because, ironically, because of his attachment to the state. When he says that the Democratic Party is not Scoop Jackson's Democratic Party, he worries that if Israel looks like it's becoming an illiberal state, that this really will have a huge impact on not just Democrats, but the U.S.-Israeli relationship. The pillar of U.S.-Israeli relations has always been shared values. During the Reagan administration, this was expanded to sort of recognize shared interests from a security standpoint in particular. But the truth is, it was always built on shared values. So if it looks like Israel is giving up some of those values, it's becoming a, quote, illiberal state, I think Biden in particular worries about what the impact that will be on the U.S.-Israeli relationship over time. Look, I wrote a book called Doomed to Succeed. It had an ironic title, meaning didn't matter how much administrations, U.S. and Israeli administrations messed up, it would always be okay in the end. But I flagged, and this was a book written back in 2015, I flagged a number of concerns. I said, literally, if you go back and you can check it, I said, if it looks like the Supreme Court is being weakened, or judicial independence is being weakened, if it looks like illiberal laws are being passed, if it looks like there's absolutely no interest in producing a two-state outcome, that can have an effect on the relationship. So in a sense, I think what you see with Biden right now is a genuine concern that Israel not lose its fundamental democratic character, because it's a fear that if it does, what makes the U.S.-Israeli relationship special will also be lost.
Right. We have just a couple minutes left. Ruth, I do want to ask you, you were Doveret Tzahal, you were the IDF spokesperson, a member of the top IDF command for a number of years. The political military relationship today is under a huge test, I think maybe not in a way that I can recall in the last couple of decades. So first of all, how would you be managing that, right? And if you were still in uniform and you were the spokesperson for the military, how would you be managing the communication side? How would you be managing this relationship where every day we hear another, often Likud member, but other party members who are attacking IDF officers who are currently serving?
I think that we are at the lowest point we ever were. And each day I woke up and I think that that's it. It can't be any worse. And then I realize that I'm wrong. It can be worse. And it is not only what they are saying about the general and the military in the uniform, because it's mostly the IDF, but it's also the police, it's also the Shabak, the Mossad. I mean, there is a sort of a huge attack on the legitimacy of the people in uniform. And this is being done, I think. I don't look at each and every sentence that a member of Knesset or any political figure says, but I look at the overall picture. I sort of assemble the pixel. And the picture that I see is that there is a deliberate pursuit or a deliberate journey to kill or deconstruct, not kill, deconstruct each and every sacred symbols that we have here. It started with the legal system. It went on to the people in uniform. It will not stop. I mean, we are touching upon the most difficult and the most painful issues in Israel. It's painting Yom HaAtzmaut and Yom HaZikaron and the bereaved families and the people who are serving in the military all of their lives. It's painting in picture of dispute and in picture of it's not ours. It's either you are with us or you are against us. It's like two trains colliding once against the other. And the question is not only what do we do. I can give my opinion about what can be done and what I should do, but I think that we need to put this on the table and understand that there is a deliberate effort to really deconstruct each and every symbol and each and every institution that we Israeli call ours. And the big divide that some people, what we are seeing right now is that the extreme forces and the extreme voices in the Israeli society from all sides, religious, ultra-religious and Orthodox, right and left, even men and women, even Israeli-born and not Israeli-born, and Israeli-born like myself in Algeria, and some others who were born in Poland. I mean, if someone is playing the extreme forces, extreme voices of the Israeli society, once against the other, and we need to find the agreement of the moderate voices, of the voices in the center, of the voices who are not extreme, who are saying, I'm willing to recognize that you are different than me. I'm willing to recognize that you are thinking different than me, and I'm willing to recognize that we have to be very careful. It's the third time that we have a Jewish sovereignty in the land of Israel. Let's not.
And they usually last about 70 years, so you know.
Okay, right. So we are really at the historical, test of us. But
right.
With regard to the attack on the military, this is also playing on two other courts, not only inside Israel. It's playing, first of all, to a legal court, the ICC. If there are some changes in the legal system, as we are seeing now being prepared, this is exposing, and what certain ministers are saying, and even putting on the table really discriminatory statement, and even I would call it racist statement, then we are exposing our military and men and women in uniform to the ICC, to the criminal court in The Hague. This is one thing. And the second thing is that it's really harming the deterrence image of Israel.
Right.
This is hurting the strength, the military strength of Israel.
So just with a few moments left, I want to go just across the panel real quickly. Yedidia mentioned the book, which is behind us, A Jewish State with the 75 Perspectives. So when you think 75 years to the future, can you give me in 1 minute, Dennis, we'll start with you, optimistic, pessimistic, where will we be?
By my nature, I'm optimistic. And I look at what Israel achieved in the first 75 years, I do seeing it being challenged right now. But I also see even the nature of the response to the challenge as being a sign of hopefulness. It is extraordinary to me that you've seen 34 weeks of demonstrations with numbers of people, many of whom thought this could never happen in Israel. Many of those who were demonstrating would never ever have demonstrated. I think that offers an indication that ultimately there is a kind of accountability and it will be provided and the system itself will ultimately survive.
Thank you, Dennis. Stuart?
In 75 years, Israel has defeated all of its major enemies and is strong enough to withstand those that remain. It has literally become the biblical land of milk and honey. It's made the desert bloom. It's using, as we drink here, water. 80% of our drinking water comes from the Mediterranean. It's sharing technology that's world-class all over the world. It's a military powerhouse. It has transformed this region, and now with the peace treaties and the Abraham Accords, it's ended its isolation, which will be final if we can get the Saudi peace done. However, that gives cause for optimism if Israel can maintain cohesion and unity of purpose, if it can maintain itself, as its founding document says, as a Jewish and democratic state in its fullness, if it can avoid the kind of erosion internally that led to the destruction of the Second Jewish Commonwealth. And I have to believe that with all the accomplishments that Israel has made, that it can do so. I think that the demonstrations, which are remarkable and involve many of my friends who have never been involved in such demonstrations, indicates a vibrancy for democracy. There are demographic changes, for sure, with the Haredi population, which have to be taken into account. But with everything that Israel has already done, I believe that it can now turn its attention to dealing with its internal divisions and hopefully have the same achievements as it has had externally.
Thank you. Ruth?
Israel is a miracle, no less than that, I think. And I'm saddened to see Israel turning from the wonder kid of the world to the problematic kid of the world. But I'm not pessimistic. I'm very optimistic, because I think that many people in Israel have realized that it's upon them, it's in their hand to not only voice their voice, but do something about this. And the extent to which the Israeli society is involved and has a say on the major issue that are perturbing or in Israel on our table, I think this is a good sign. I think that by our DNA, we know how to deal with disagreement. We know also how to reach accord and consent among us. I don't see the path to it yet. I'm still very worried, but somehow I'm still optimistic.
Okay, Elliott?
I'm not going to change the tone of optimism here. I think Israel has solved its major security problems with one exception, Iran. And we can hope very much over the next, certainly 75 years, I would hope for a lot less than that, to see the collapse of the Islamic Republic, which is certainly something the people of Iran want. And if that happens, Israel is not only integrated into the region becomes a far more peaceful place. One other point, which is we're just seeing now, maybe this decade, maybe the tipping of the balance of population, where Israel has a larger Jewish population than the United States. And I do think something we were already seeing, and we will see clearly in the next 25, 50, 75 years, Israel will be absolutely clearly the center of world Jewish life.
Right. Okay, before I just bid farewell to our panelists, Yedidia would like to just say a few words to wrap up this session.
Okay, I don't want to wrap up the session. I want to say something as a host. What you saw today is an exercise. How to handle major disputes when all the sides are really, really sincere in their feelings. So how should we, JPPI, should deal with the issue? Elliott does not need me to protect him. He's as patriot as anybody else. We are so proud that he's a board member here. And I thank you for coming again. However, many people feel mistakenly, doesn't matter, but they feel so, that they want to express their disagreement with whatever is going on here. That's why we decided to find some kind of balance. And what you saw here is our humble try to maintain different aspects of the dispute. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me just say, Benny Gantz will be joining us any moment, so we'll just, if you want to stay in your seats, if anyone maybe wants to ask anyone here a question, any questions from the crowd for any of our panelists? Stuart, before you head off, I think we have a moment or two. If you stay, we're happy to take a couple of questions. If anyone has, if you could just speak loud so we could hear. Any takers?
Good try.
Okay. If everyone could just be seated, Benny Gantz will be here any moment. Any quick question from anyone in the audience? We have like a minute or two. Moshe, please, very quickly and loud. Okay. Who are you asking? Stuart, you want to give a quick answer to that question? Very quick. why support the two-state solution? But I'm told we have one quick minute.
I think there are two reasons. One, it's the only way to preserve a majority Jewish democratic state. And second, because biblically, 16 times it's repeated to treat the stranger, because remember, you were strangers in the land of Egypt. You have to live with 3 million Palestinians in the West Bank and 2 million and over 1.5 million in Gaza. They're your neighbors, for better or for worse. They may be bad neighbors, but the job is to try to make them better neighbors. And if you can't get a state initially, at least try to extend educational and economic opportunities so that they feel that they have a chance for a better way of life. To have a majority Jewish state, to have a continued permanent occupation of people who have no voice in their future, is not consistent with that value.
So I just want to thank Ambassador Stuart Eizenstat, former Brigadier General Ruth Yaron, former U.S. Deputy National Security Advisor and more Elliott Abrams, former Ambassador Dennis Ross. Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you just remain seated. Thank you to our panelists. We're now pleased to welcome Chairman of the National Unity Party, former Defense Minister, IDF Chief of Staff, Benny Gantz, who will make some remarks and then take some questions, I'm told. Please.
Hey, Elliott. I'm very happy, even though I had a demonstration. Shalom, everybody. I'm very happy to be here today. This impressive book that I went through, The Jewish State of 75 Perspectives, was edited by the president of this institution, Professor Yedidia, former Chief of Justice of the Israeli Supreme Court, Aaron Barak, and former president of the Brandeis University and current president of the Global Mandel Foundation, Professor Judea Reisenhardt, honorable ambassadors, staff and friends of the Jewish People Policy Institution, esteemed guests. The discussion we need to be having today is what will Israel look like in the next 75 years? In her essay in the book, Alex Riff, from the 1.5 Generation movement, recalls asking yourself over the years the question, who is really in charge here? Who is responsible? In Hebrew, there's a unique frame for that. Who is Baal Habayit? The heated public argument on this important question is tearing us apart today, and the answer to that question will decide our future. The State of Israel is a Jewish state, not because of one law or another. Israel is a Jewish state because of its heritage and values. Because of the fact that most of its citizens see it as such, and likewise, they desire it to continue being as such. Riff writes, "In my eyes, a Jewish state is one that is ever-changing, a country that is naturally learning and growing, she adds, Israel is a state that cannot be without and cannot be without me. What is needed of us is not to alter our fundamental values, but to know how to evolve and reach consensual understandings that will protect the miracle we built here together. The answer to the questions, who is Baal Habayit, who is in charge, has to be, we are all co-partners in charge. One cannot be without the other, and the other cannot be without all of us. On that matter, I want to talk today. Over the last decades, for various reasons, the dangerous flames rising from our disputes burn taller, threatening to burn us from within. Professor Miron Isaacson made a noteworthy point on the subject in his essay. He suggested adding another core component to the definition of the Jewish state, solidarity between its people and between the different groups in the society. Solidarity that must manifest in the education system, in the manifestos of the political parties, and in all aspects of life. In order for that solidarity to be built, we must ensure all parts of group of the society are represented, as my friend Rabbi Benny Lau suggested in the book. We need to remember, as Minister Moshe Arbel writes, that we must first seek out our common goods we all derive from Judaism, like how to treat those in need or those in different form of ourselves, instead of falling in love with what separates us and the disputes between us. Solidarity, pluralism, and common ground. My friends, ahead of us lie a great security and economic challenges that I will not elaborate on here today. The state of Israel cannot allow itself to be torn apart by a handful of radicals. Radicals who seek to change the face of our nation through a judicial overhaul. Radicals who seeks to exempt sectors of the society from the partnership and responsibility for guaranteeing Israel's future. On the contrary, the nation must build that solidarity between its citizens on the foundation of the understanding that every one of us may live according to their own beliefs, while recognizing the need to compromise so that we may live side by side, all under the same roof. The singer Kobe Oz eloquently captured the need to compromise in the book. He said, Judaism doesn't like totality. It doesn't want you to work 100% of your time, nor does it wishes 100% of your wealth to stay yours. In the Jewish state as well, we must tend to the needs of each individual, yet each individual needs to learn to compromise a small part of his 100%. I am being criticized these days for my incoherent policy. How can one be secular yet traditional? Guarantee everyone serves while respecting the study of Torah. How do we not compromise on our security and retreat to 67 borders while not allowing ourselves to become a bi-national state? There are those that say that this approach simply sweeps our problems under the rug or even defeats in nature. In my eyes, radicalism, which by all means is simpler and more coherent, is the greatest threat and danger to the Jewish people today. Easy and simple solutions are not a better ideology. They are tragedy in the face of reality's complexities. This is what we are seeing today in the battle against terror, in the attempt to retrieve governance, and in other areas of life. This is what happened when radicalism meets reality. Our ability to agree on common grounds and rally Israeli society inwards towards the center is the single most important effort for our next 75 years. If and when I form a government, I not only do intend on having representation from all parts of society, including Arabs and ultra-Orthodox, I intend on my government to focus first on the wide range of matters we can all agree upon. Only from within those agreements we will ensure finding equitable solutions for the major disputes we are experiencing. To carry out fundamental changes, we must unite the people and carry out changes in a consensual manner that embodies the solidarity thriving at the heart of most Israelis. With that, we must not sideline those major disputes, and we must not leave them for the radicals to decide. After 75 years, the time has come to consensually update the status quo so that it better reflects the local identity within the national framework, to diversify the legal system while preserving its independence, to formulate a new model of national service, one that will promise our security and strength of the people military for decades to come, to ensure quality state education for all, as well as education reflecting the beliefs of each sector. Esteemed guests, if we ignore these immense challenges, they will explode in our faces. If we try rushed, one-sided revolutions, we will disintegrate. So that we may overcome that what Professor Stern here calls the maturing test, we first need solidarity. For us to be able to carry out significant changes that address the burning challenges and vision of our times, Jews, Arabs, ultra-Orthodox and secular here in Israel, and those in the diaspora, we cannot have one group feel they are solely in charge and responsible for our home. No group can feel if they are the only Baal Habayit in our shared home. ultimately, we all need to feel home in our home. Thank you very much.
Let me turn that on. Thank you very much, Benny Gantz. So I want to ask, there's a few questions. I mean, you spoke about if and when you establish a government and how you're going to call in everyone, but also how there are issues that you do want to advance in retaining Israel's democratic and Jewish character, right? So, for example, one of the things that comes to mind for me is civil marriage, something that I think many of your voters would want to see happen. But on the other hand, we've seen how in the last few weeks you have been maybe warming up to ultra-Orthodox members of Knesset. Maybe those are potential future partners in a Benny Gantz-led coalition. How would that work?
First of all, we believe in Brit HaZugiyut. I don't know how you say it in
something a little less than civil marriage, but an agreement that allows for couples to establish a legal standing.
And I guess that we'll have to figure out what suitable for each society and how it wants to do it. Look, I think it's very complicated. It's true. Look, Israel was founded as a Jewish state. And by being a Jewish state, it is very hard to disconnect the religion from the state as we all want it to happen, or as some of us want it to happen. So we will have to walk issue by issue and figure out what would be the right way for us to practice liberalism as much as we can. And you know, by being liberal, and this is, in a way, a demand I have basically from everyone, because what is it that we are all talking about? We want to have one Israel, not the Israel Achat Oveot Barak as a political movement, but one Israel, because I've been hearing provinces, I've been hearing Israel and Judea, I've been hearing different concepts now being raised. No, it's one Israel. It has to be Jewish. It has to be well defended and justice vis-à-vis the Palestinian, so we can somehow separate them without taking the security risks that come with that. And it has to be democratic and liberal. And the liberal aspect, it should be demanded from everyone, from the secular to respect the ultra-Orthodox, and from the ultra-Orthodox to respect the secular. We are holy and no one is going anywhere. You can blink as much as you want with your eyes. No one is going to disappear. We are here. That's it.
It's a beautiful idea in theory, but in political practicality, reality, is that possible?
Well, it has to be possible because there's no other way to figure out how to stay here together. And once something it becomes a national necessity, we will find a way to do it. It will take time, yes. Do we need to have a triangle inside this framework I talked about of the agreed vision? I believe in the Declaration of Independence, right set of rules. It can be right reform, it can be basic law, it can be a whole constitution, either one. And we have to have some kind of national fairness where everybody gets to serve the country, everybody is being served by the country, and like this we can live with one another, because no one, if there will be only one winner, we will all lose.
So
I have no doubt about it.
So if I understand what you're saying, if and when you form a coalition, using your words, you would invite the Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox, in, but you wouldn't give them veto over matters of religion and state like is currently happening in this coalition. You would say, for example, we're going to liberalize conversion. Yedidia recently wrote about how maybe that is one of the solutions that we need. We're going to do Brit HaZugiyut. We're going to do things, your part, but there's no veto power.
If indeed we can form a government based on the center and strong enough in terms of electoral power, it will give us a golden opportunity to have all the other segments in the government to represent their societies without using or overusing their political power. Now, it is within our interest, seriously speaking, it is within our interest to enable everyone to practice his own ways. And I believe, Yaakov, that eventually they will have to understand that. You know, I was accused last week, or 2 weeks ago, for running after the ultra-Orthodox. I went to visit Rabbi Bergman in Kollel Rashbi in Bnei Brak. So I told them, you know what I did just before going there? He says, what did you do just before going there? I said, I spoke to the Chinuch HaMamlachti. How do you say? The national...
The secular school system.
The main secular stream. And from there, I went to Rabbi Bergman. And from Rabbi Bergman, I went to Aviv Geffen for dinner. One day. And you play on all fields. I think that we will be less strong if we won't recognize one another. And one of the reasons I'm suggesting the new model of service, not just because of national fairness, it's important. I believe that by serving this way or another, the sense of equality will be in place, the states of rights will be in place for every sector, and knowing each other and getting closer to one another will also make it easier for us to live without differences. We will feel that those differences make us unique, but not make us threatening one another. And this is hardship. This is going to be very hard. I don't know how much I'll succeed. I know how much I want it.
The judicial reform. Your party has been participating in those so-called compromise talks that President Herzog has hosted, as well as many other forums that many other people are involved in. The Knesset is currently on recess, so things are a little quieter, but they're coming back already. Well, already even before the Knesset returns after the Chagim at the end of October, we have the Supreme Court's decision that's coming up on the reasonableness clause and other massive demonstrations. How bad is this going to be in the winter session of the Knesset? Is it possible, therefore, to be a compromise? You were a little more optimistic in the beginning. You become a little less optimistic?
Once again, maybe it's a language gap on behalf of myself. I'm willing to compromise nothing. I'm willing to come to an agreement on many issues. I will not compromise over the democracy in terms of the politicization of the judicial system, nor do I intend to compromise over the independence of the judicial system on all its vectors. Zero compromise over this issue. Can I come to an agreement on other issue of how you found or how you set up a fundamental law or others? Definitely yes. Is it really important if it's going to be 69 or 71 or 79 or 80 or 81 parliament members? Those are issues that has to do nothing with compromising. This is something we can come to an agreement upon. So first, I'm seeking agreements. I'm not seeking to compromise over the Israeli democracy. Secondly, yes, if we won't be able to solve this till this parliament comes back to session, it's going to be very tough for everybody. Israel have been damaged in any way I can think of, diplomatically, economically, socially, any way you can think of. The gaps between the diaspora communities and the state of Israel grew. And I think we are losing on all areas, and I think we must solve it in the right way. I think that the demonstrations were very important, and they are still very important. And by the way, they are far wider than just the judicial overhaul. You see more and more events, Imahot Bachazit and other phenomena that's starting to rise because it has been a wake-up call to all of us. And it's a huge crisis. And because it's such a huge crisis, it's such a great opportunity at the very same time. If you flip a coin of a crisis, on the other side it says opportunity. And we have to take care of it as much as we can. I hope we can solve it. It's not in the hand of the demonstrations to solve it, it's the hand of us, the leaders, to solve it, and this is what we will try to do.
So we have an opportunity to take a couple of questions from the audience. Owen, please. But just loud, and then I'll repeat it. So let me just translate. The question was, because it was in Hebrew, so I'm just going to help you out. The question was, yesterday the Attorney General gave her answer to the petition against the Reasonableness Act and said that, in her view, it should be canceled and annulled. She's come under a lot of criticism from all sides, mainly from the right-wing side of the political spectrum. What is your response to her answer to the court and to the attacks against her?
I think we have to differ between what I think of her answer and what I think of her and her mission, I would say. I believe that the mission of the General Counselor is basically to serve the government, to consult the government, and to preserve the rule of law. And she has to be totally independent and solely independent and coming up with what she thinks, professionally speaking. And I think that all the assaults on her, it's a kind of terror and trying to deter her from doing her job. And all along the way, I supported her professional independence, and I will do so as much as I can. I think there's no ground for such activities.
Thank you. Yes, sir. If you just speak loudly, please.
My name is Ben Malov. I'm a lecturer at Bar-Ilan University in political science and conflict resolution. I just wanted to inject a conceptual idea.
Let's keep it to a question, though, please.
Federalism, which involves diversity within unity, which I think you're implying. And it also implies, regarding the Palestinians, a federal solution or a federal approach, which would be not two states, not one state, but a state and a half. How could you perhaps reassure?
First, I'll be very happy to go into to understand it in a more deeper way. But I won't leave it aside. Look, the two-state solution is a very old phrase and a very remote vision. And everybody that looks at it go back to his own concept, to his own phrases. Some would say 67 line. We'll be here, they'll be there, everything will be solved. I don't think that that's reality. This is anymore a reality. And unfortunately, our experience with withdrawals is a very negative one. And I think that most Israelis doesn't want to control the Palestinians, and all Israelis doesn't want to take the security risk that come with this measure or that measure that you will end up doing. Therefore, what I'm suggesting for the time being is what I called, and I'm sorry that Micha Goodman is not here because it's a combined phrase, two entities situation. For the time being, in which Israel maintains its security superiority over the area. Each one is taking care of his own internal security and aspects. 2, combine economies, and then hopefully to create some kind of better reference so we can renegotiate the permanent agreement that can jump back to any phrase that one can ask for. To discuss now a permanent agreement in the shape of two-state solution, it's a fine declaration, but it's very hard to achieve it. Now, I want to prevent Israel from being, Micha, I just spoke highly of you. So I'm seeking to settle the relations between us and the Palestinians, and from a Zionistic and Jewish perspective, I want to separate myself from them in a way that will not endanger our security, and I don't want to stay embedded with them in a way that will endanger our Jewish and democratic segments. I don't want to have a binational sentence, I said it. And I'm not, I'm going to the Kotel. I always ask the same prayer, Ave Shalom Aleinu, Aseh Shalom, Ave Shalom Aleinu, V'aseh Shalom Benenu. That's the same constant prayer I'm using all the time. So with them, it's Ave Shalom Aleinu. I'm willing to work for that without risking the security of the State of Israel.
And just before we let you go, there was a big discussion here between Elliott and Dennis and Stuart and Ruth before about Saudi. If there's Saudi normalization and you are asked to come into the government to replace the current people because the Palestinian concessions will not be possible in this current government, for the state, for peace, like you just said, the prayer that you go to the Kotel to give, to support that prayer, would you be willing to take that step?
No, I can support it from outside. I don't have to be inside in order to support it. I don't think Bibi wants it. I don't think I can afford it. If this deal will be a good one, and I have my hesitation on this issue, I have my will, I have my hopes, I have my concept. This is a totally different issue. Then I will support it from the outside.
Benny Gantz, thank you very much. So ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a brief break and reconvene here at 6:15. Thank you. Micha Goodman. So please join us back inside, and we will continue. Aumann, thank you. So if you could just take your seats, Ana Shevet. Okay. Shh. We'll just give everyone one last second to sit down. Okay. Yedidia, please take it away.
Hi, everybody. Please sit down. Okay, in this session, we are going to deal with the question of the future of the Jewish state, and we are going to conduct a conversation with two serious but interesting, usually it doesn't go together, this time serious and interesting public intellectuals, I would say. Professor Israel Aumann, Robert Aumann, mathematician from the Hebrew University. If you don't know, he received the Nobel Prize 18 years ago? Yes, 18. He's a mathematician. He wouldn't know, obviously. It was 18 years ago. And on his work on conflict and cooperation through game theory analysis. And the second, Dr. Micha Goodman, really one of the major prolific, I would say, writers and speakers in Israeli society. We all owe you a lot, Micha. Thank you, both of you, for coming and joining us. As a starting point for the discussion, and I hope it will be discussion and not just lectures, guys, okay? I would like to frame the discussion along the following lines. And all of us, we know the terms of Rabbi Soloveitchik, Brit Yehud and Brit Goral, on covenant of destiny and covenant of fate. The way I look at us, Israel and Israelis, we are probably not sharing the covenant of destiny. We have different views on the destiny of the state of Israel, of the purpose, the vision, where we should head. We do not agree. But at least till last year, despite the fact that we did not share the vision, we shared the fate. We acted as one. We had our, obviously, disagreements, but we knew that we have to act as one. And that's why Israel is such an amazing success on all fronts. On all fronts. Unbelievable. I remember myself as a kid, born here as opposed to the two. Are you Israeli born? No.
Born and raised.
Really? Okay, as opposed to you. As a kid in the 60s, if somebody would come to me in the 60s and tell me that Israel today will look the way it looks, I would never believe. Nobody would believe. Amazing success. Despite the fact that we did not agree ever on the vision of the state. And my interpretation on the vision of the state, of the vision, yeah.
Not division, but vision.
Exactly.
You agree that there is division.
There is the vision, right, about the vision. Okay, nowadays, last year, this year, 2023, תשפ"ג, שלא ייזכר לטובה, I feel that our disputes over the destiny is shaking up our agreement about the fate. I think that what we're seeing right now is cracks in the agreement about how we can function together. As a beginning for this discussion, I would like to hear, first of all, each one of yours, your vision. Then we'll talk about the fate. But let's start with the vision. Professor Aumann, the younger one, please start.
Okay, I think the vision is what we are. Yes, we're a Jewish state. Yes, in other words, Shabbat is the day of rest, and you know, every country there's a day of rest, and in our place it's Shabbat, and most boys are circumcised, have a brit, and the streets are named after people in Jewish history, and the places are named after people in Jewish history, and people usually get married. Most people, when they get married with the Rabbanot, and I think the fact of the matter is that we are a Jewish state. We're not, many of us are not Shomrei Mitzvot, but we're Jews, okay? And I think we'll continue to be Jews. I think...
so the character of the public sphere, is making us Jewish.
The public sphere, yeah. Also, to a large extent, also the private sphere, you know, yes. Being circumcised is not only public.
But you circumcise in Brooklyn as well, you know? You circumcise in Brooklyn as well. Is that a part of it?
So I think we are largely... I think there is a problem with a minority of people who are not Jewish, yes, and somehow they should be integrated into the Jewish people, maybe through conversion, maybe by other means, yes, but I'm not talking about the Arab minority. I'm talking about 5% of the population of Israel are in fact not Jewish at all, yes. They should become part of the Jewish people, yes. In the book of Esther is written, "V'rabim amei haaretz mityahadim." Many people became Jewish, yes, after the plot of Haman failed. Many people became Jewish. I think I don't know how what exactly happened to them when they became Jewish, but in the same sense, people should, the minority. But I think, on the whole, I don't think that's going to change with the cracks that you mentioned. The cracks are important, but I don't think that's going to change. I mean, even people on the, you know, if you're opposed to the reform, yes, that a lot of religious people are opposed to the reform. If you're opposed to the reform, that doesn't mean that you'll get married in a Catholic church. Yeah. I think it's okay. Yes, it's okay.
Okay, Micha.
So first of all, thank you for your like kacha. שומעים? If I understand Professor Aumann's description of Israel, Israel is a Jewish state in the sense that it's populated mainly by Jews, and there is a public space that somehow represents that. And I think you're saying, we have it, that's enough. From now on, Zionism is about preserving what we've achieved. Right? So, my understanding of your answer is, I think, Theodor Herzl wrote not one, but two important books regarding Zionism. The first one, 1896, Medinat HaYehudim, Eizenstat, I think is about the state of the Jews. And then a second book he wrote called Altneuland in 1902. There's two different visions for Zionism. In his 1896, Medinat HaYehudim, in the heart of the book is the problem of the persecution of Jews, of anti-Semitism. And this is the narrative we all know of Theodor Herzl. Zionism is a response to anti-Semitism. Roughly speaking, this is how Jabotinsky understood Herzl. The world is a hostile place for Jews. It's a dangerous place for Jews. We need a state where we can escape we can escape a hostile world and be protected from a hostile world. So there is a problem, anti-Semitism, there is a solution, Zionism. That's Herzl version 1896. In 1902, Zionism is there to solve a different problem. Humanity has problems. Humanity, according to Altneuland, have serious problems of matching politics and technology. I won't go into the problems he addresses in Altneuland, but the problems are problems of humanity. And what's the solution to the problems of humanity? Zionism. Jews immigrating to Eretz Yisrael, creating an experiment in technology and politics, and creating the know-how that could heal the world. That is a very different vision for Zionism. It's not a Zionism that says we need a state in order to escape the world and protect ourselves from humanity. We need a state in order to inspire the world and help heal humanity. And if I understand your question, I think the first 75 years, we were in the Zionism of Yedidia, of Medinat HaYehudim, of preserving the Jewish people, and I think that's how I understand also what Professor Aumann is saying, preserving the status quo. We've achieved it, now we have to preserve it. That's the Zionism, I think, of Medinat HaYehudim. But what would it look like if we start envisioning the Zionism of Altneuland, where we don't ask only how do we protect Jews and somehow escape a hostile world, but what do we have to offer to that world? What could heal that world? And it sounds like a very, very naive question, but I just want to articulate the question itself and put it on the table. I think the way I understand Medinat HaYehudim is 1896 work of Herzl, is the following. Herzl understood that anti-Semitism is a serious problem. He can't find a great solution that heals anti-Semitism. And then he starts thinking about a new universal ideology called liberal nationalism. Liberal nationalism is the idea that just like if classic liberalism is that all individuals have equal rights, liberal nationalism is that all nations have equal rights, especially the right for self-determination. And this is a universal idea that the world, liberal nationalists like to believe, like Jabotinsky and like Herzl, like to believe that the world is a family, it's a mishpacha, it's a family of what? Of nations. And if the Jews want to be a part of humanity, want to be a part of the family of nations, it has to be organized as a nation. So be accepted into humanity once it'll be organized as a nation. This is how I think what Heschel did. He found a universal solution to a Jewish problem. There's a Jewish problem, anti-Semitism. There's a universal solution, liberal nationalism. And he married a universal solution to a Jewish problem. Maybe, I just want to put, maybe the next 75 years, if they're not only about escaping the world, but also somehow healing the world, inspiring the world, which was always an instinct within the Zionist movement in different versions, by the founding fathers of this country. Maybe it's to turn the question upside down. Maybe now we don't have to find universal solutions to Jewish problems, but Jewish solutions to universal problems. The world is suffering from two great problems. One is global warming, climate change. It's a serious threat on the future of humanity, or on the future of our ability to have modern civilization on planet Earth. But also has a second problem, which I think is a greater problem: political polarization. Political polarization. These great divides we're experiencing in Israel now, Yedidia, are very Israeli, but they're not unique to Israel. The world is suffering from high levels of polarization, which are neutralizing the ability of both sides of the aisle to cooperate, to do great things together. And as a result, nation states are weaker, they're frozen now. Israel, asking what's wrong with Israel is like asking what's wrong with the summer of Tel Aviv. It's the wrong question. It's not that Tel Aviv the summer of Tel Aviv went wrong. There's global warming. We don't ask what's the problem with Tel Aviv, what's the problem with the world. Polarization is also a global phenomenon today. And here's a question. I just want to leave it a question. I don't know if there's Jewish solutions to the universal problem of climate change, but I do think that Jewish wisdom can help us deal with the second problem, maybe even a greater problem: political polarization. The tradition that developed the art of arguing, the art that breaks binary thinking, not prophetic thinking. I know the daughter of Heschel is here, but I think now it's not the time for the prophets, but for the rabbis. Not for binary thinking, but for Talmudic thinking. And in that sense, and with this I'll end, here's, I think, one of the greatest challenges for Israel in the next 75 years. How do we move from Yidenstat to Altneuland without giving up on Yidenstat? I think Professor Aumann is right. This is a tremendous achievement, having a state with Jews. And we have to preserve it and fight for it and keep it alive. And what you were discussing, Yedidia, of the Brit Goral cracking, not only the Brit Yehud, I don't think it's serious. I think we're having a fight, and when people have fights, so after the fight, you regret things you said and things you did. I think it's just the heat of the moment. I don't think that our Brit Goral is collapsing. I might be wrong, but it might be. But when we talk about our Brit Yehud, about the vision for Israel, I think it's time to move from Yidenstat, to keep Yidenstat alive, to move to Altneuland, to ask not only how do we protect ourselves from the world, but what do you have to offer the world, to reverse Heschel's question, not only to find universal solutions to Jewish problems, but let's start discussing how do we find Jewish solutions to universal problems.
I feel that we had two answers. People are polite here, but you cannot think of more different answers to the same question. Just the opposite. Professor, and that's my job here to make it alive. So Professor Aumann says, well, first of all, we are ready, and we have to maintain. Let's keep Shabbat special. Let's keep our practice as Jews, and we are a majority. And this is a fulfillment of a vision. Comes the younger guy, says, are you kidding me? We have to change the world. So what can be more conflicting between the two of you? I would like each one of you to reflect on the others. Professor Aumann, you hear here a cry for changing the world using, excuse me.
I'm very conservative by it. I don't.
Okay, using the Jewish tradition and the fact that we have a state. We have a platform to do it, not just as individuals.
I don't see how that's going to happen. I think we are changing the world in some ways. Yes, we are very good at certain things. Yes, at high tech and so on. Yes, but
game theory, for example.
Okay, game theory. Okay, yeah, we're good at certain things. So Jews and altogether have been very good at intellectual endeavors. Okay, and I think that's part of the Jewish tradition, because we say every morning Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. Torah study is equivalent to the whole of the Jewish sphere. Yes, Torah study, yeah, it really is. And Jews have taken Torah study, and some of them have erased the Torah and made it into just study, but that's okay also. Okay, But I don't see. I don't see that that's happening. Okay, that Jews, as Jews, are changing the world. Yeah, maybe, I don't know. Take the. I don't see it. I don't see it happening. But it's yeah. In other words, Jews are changing the world. Yes, but not as. Oh, you know the movie Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
They're all Jews. They're all Jews. The only non-Jew is Harry Truman. Everybody's Jewish in the picture. So fine, okay, but they didn't act as Jews. Okay, they didn't act as Jews. So maybe Jews are changing the world, but not sort of as not a yi'ud. All right.
I want to challenge Micha. I'm also optimistic by nature, and I tend to see the reality of today as reality of today, not necessarily the reality of the future. I tend to agree with you. Nevertheless, we cannot ignore what's going on, and we have to face it, not just to talk about changing the world, but about fixing us. And when I talk about the visions for the state of Israel, I would like to bring you back here to Jerusalem today. What is your take about the vision for Israel, how to deal with what we are experiencing right now? How can you make your optimistic view reality and make sure it will happen?
So first of all, right now, Professor Aumann is right. We're not changing the world. Now, by the way, the shift of Zionism is in diaspora. In 1,900 years of Galut, Jews had a tremendous impact on the world. Oppenheimer. But Judaism didn't influence the world. When we were speaking Hebrew and being sovereign here, hundreds of years beforehand, we created the Tanakh, that the ideas in the Tanakh about God, about humanity, about time, about Shabbat, those ideas changed the world. The shift in Jewish history in biblical times, Jewish ideas changed the world. Later on, Jewish individuals changed the world. I think Alt-Neuland, I think that shift in Zionism is about going back to Judaism having influence on the world, not just individual Jews. But the problem is, and thank you for bringing us back to the reality of Jerusalem 2023. Right now, what's really happening is that we are not changing the world is changing us. We're living in a poisonous, polarized world, and the polarization of the world and the poison of the world is entering Israel and dividing Israel. Like Brazil is polarized, Argentina is polarized, the Americans are so polarized, the Spanish are polarized. Now we're just am kechol ha'amim. By the way, I also think we might be more polarized than them because we also have polarized cultural genes within us. So now polarization is not a global problem we have to find a Jewish solution to, but it's an Israeli problem we have to find Israeli answers to. I think the two characteristics of Israeli polarization is the following. We hate each other today probably more, I don't want to say more than ever because we had peaks in the 50s, the 90s, but I think we're at least reaching our own peaks. And polarization is a very specific brand of hate. Racism is when you hate someone because of the color of their skin. Misogyny is you hate someone because of her gender. Polarization is when you hate someone because he's a leftist, or because she's a Trump supporter, or because they're Bibi supporters. Polarization gives rise to a very specific brand of hate, hating people because of their politics. That brand of hate is on the rise all over the world. Robert Putnam from Harvard argues that today America is more polarized than it was ever since the 1860s. That's the United States of America. That doesn't mean America is entering civil war, but it does mean our American friends are in deep seems like they're in trouble. And Israel is a part of the world, also Israel polarized, and that brand of hate is on the rise. But there's a different way to think about polarization. Not as the rise of hate, but the destruction of the ability of both sides to find agreement. That's not emotional polarization, ideological polarization, where the disagreement grows. And here's the paradox of Israeli politics today. In 2023, or in the past, we're ending a few decades where ideologically, moderate right-wingers, moderate left-wingers are more closer today than they ever were before in the past. I stand behind this on almost every issue. Moderate right-wingers, moderate left-wingers, and centrists, like Benny Gantz that was here before, are closer ideologically on issues and on policies than they ever were before. And at the same time, they hate each other probably more than ever before. Noam Gidron from Hebrew U just came out with a research showing that ever since in Israel we don't have research showing polarization back to the 1860s. I don't know how Putnam came up with that, but we do have from the 80s, and we're more polarized emotionally. So here's a paradox of Israeli polarization. We hate each other more than the past, while we agree with each other more than the past. So here's the big question. What's going to guide us? Our intellectually we agree, while emotionally we hate. What's going to guide us? And I think, and the reason why I'm optimistic in the long term about Israel, is that in Israel we have a pretty large majority, between 60 to 70% of Israelis that share values, that agree with the hybrid formula of the state of Israel, a Jewish democracy. And when this 60% says Jewish, they don't mean a state that contains Jews. They mean Jewish in the thick sense of the word, that includes ideas, sacred texts, cultural habits. And when we say democratic, we don't just mean democratic in the procedural sense, an Israeli basuf, in the procedural sense of the term. Democracy comes with a set of values of diversity, individualism, human rights, liberalism. Now, how do we balance Judaism and democracy? I don't know. Those are the arguments, but it's an interesting argument. It's not people on the radical left that want Israel to be a democratic state that's not Jewish, or in different brands of the right that see Israel as Jewish in nature and identity, and being democratic is just a procedure. Most Israelis buy in to the hybrid equation of Israel. That hybrid equation is not mentioned in Megillat Atzmaut, but I think it's the best interpretation of Megillat Atzmaut. So here's a question, Yedidia, I just want to end your question with a different question or a challenge. How does the Megillat Atzmaut majority govern Israel again? Right now, the Megillat Atzmaut majority, the Israelis that completely buy the hybrid formula of the state of Israel, that's not the majority governing Israel, because that majority is split within itself over artificial ideological battle lines. If we could heal the artificial polarization dividing the Megillat Atzmaut majority in Israel, we'll be able to deal with the real polarization which exists between the broad Israeli center and the extreme right and the extreme left. That's where the real ideological polarization exists, while there's artificial polarization creating not artificial but real hate between around artificial lines, splitting the Megillat Atzmaut majority right in the middle.
What did you say? Real hate?
There's real hate.
Hate? H-A-T-E?
Sin'ah.
Sin'ah?
Yeah.
I don't see any real hate.
I'll tell you why you don't see real hate for good reasons. For good reasons. My bet is that you're not on social media.
What's that?
Are you on social media?
Do I read social?
No. Are you on Facebook?
No.
Okay, so I think it's a good idea to stay off Facebook, and I think we should all follow the guidelines of Professor Aumann. That's how we don't let the poison or the digital revelation invade our mind.
But even so, real hate, you find it on Facebook, okay, but Facebook doesn't represent most people.
I agree.
Huh?
Okay, my friends, we're running out of time. First of all, regarding Megillat Atzmaut, you know, JPPI asked Mif'al HaPais, I'm saying the name, to give us some donation. Mif'al HaPais, okay? It's not right or left. Am I wrong? No, it's not right or left.
Mamlechti.
We asked them to give us some donation in order to do some project about Megillat Atzmaut, the Declaration of Independence. They were considering seriously, apparently, and eventually, and I'm saying it on record, b'chavana, they said, well, today this is a disputable document, so we cannot support it. Unbelievable. And I can give you so many stories that showing that to be optimistic, you have to be really, really, really optimistic. It's tough, but I am. And I want to end up, since we're running out of time, by saying my take 2 minutes. Please. 2 minutes. To me, and I basically agree with you, Micha, that the differences between us are smaller than the way they are being brought to the public in reality. And we have lots of information supporting it, actually. Data. So what's going on? I believe, think about yourself or about your kids in the adolescence area. When you're 17 and 18. And you look at the mirror, and what do you see over there? Love-hate relationship. Who is this person on the mirror? And your feeling towards your parents, your friends, your whatever, your environment is always hostile and friendship, love, hate. This is Israel today. 75 years old is adolescence for us Jews as a ribonut, as a sovereignty. And we're very young. And we're fighting. Yes, we're fighting. But I agree with Micha that eventually, I don't know when, but eventually we'll come out of this adolescence into maturity. And differences will stay with us. Differences are real. They will stay with us. But we'll be able to contain it and to act together and to rebuild what Soloveitchik called covenant of faith. I want to thank you very much for coming, and I want everybody, Yaakov, come guys.
Thank you very much to Micha and Professor Aumann, and to Yedidia, of course. We have our final session and panel of the evening, which I think is definitely worth staying for, will be fascinating. I'll also be moderating, so I promise to try to keep it interesting. It's on a Jewish state with a focus on national and cultural aspects. So let me, if we could just have quiet, let me ask to join us at the table here Judge Rachel Freier, the Acting State Supreme Court Justice of New York, Professor Susannah Heschel of Jewish Studies at Dartmouth, Ambassador Salai Meridor, the Chairman of the National Library of Israel, and Professor Myron Isaacson, a poet and novelist and professor of Hebrew literature at Bar Ilan University. Okay, so we're here to talk about what it means to be a Jewish state, and I guess also to an extent what it means to be a Jewish people, with a focus on the national and cultural aspects. So we have a great prestigious panel. I thought we'd start with the judge on the panel, Judge Freier. First of all, welcome. And part of, I think, what seems to be happening in Israel right now is a clash between Jewish Israel and democratic Israel. And I'm curious how you, someone who, and if you're not familiar with the judge's story, maybe you could share a little yourself, but breaking glass ceilings in the U.S. and also specifically in the Hasidic community, someone like you who merges multiple identities and seemingly on the surface identities that would contradict one another, kind of like what you've been hearing here, the contradiction between being Jewish, being democratic as a state. How do you live with that clash, and how does that play out?
So first of all, I want to just thank you for inviting me to be here. It's just an honor to be here and a privilege. As I was sitting in the audience and listening to all the speakers before me, I felt like I'm back in law school. It was amazing. The difference is, so when I was in law school, we were studying history, and here history is being made, so it's very relevant. I also have to just give a disclaimer that as an acting judge in New York, I cannot discuss politics, not American politics or any country's politics, no court cases, no politics whatsoever. So I'm going to have to be very careful in how I answer the questions. I can really just share my story and my perspectives, but avoid any political undertones or overtones whatsoever. So in terms of my story was really a very personal journey. I never thought that I would be invited to speak anyplace. It was just me breaking through what I had always been told as a kid growing up, and that was if you want to continue being religious and Hasidic, you have to really stay enclosed and sheltered in the insular world, and you can't go out in the outside world. And I always had a passion for law and, advocacy. So when I was a kid growing up, I took courses in school that prepared me to be a maskira, a secretary for lawyers. And in my mind, that was going to be the epitome, the glass ceiling that I could reach in my life. And I thought that I'd be very happy. And when I graduated high school, I was 17 years old. I got a job in working for lawyers. And I got married a year later to a nice Hasidic young man. And I was going to live the Beit Yaakov dream. I was going to be a secretary, and my husband was going to sit and learn Torah. And that was going to be the beginning and the end of my story. But what happened was that when I turned 30, it wasn't enough for me anymore. I was working for lawyers that were younger than me, and I said, well, why can't I do the same thing? So first I encouraged my husband to go to college, and I thought that he would vicariously live my dream for me. And at his college graduation, this little voice inside of me was very, very loud. Ruchi, now it's your turn, now it's your turn. And surprisingly, I had my husband's full-hearted support. Maybe in the beginning not so much, but as he realized that I wasn't going to compromise anything, he was very proud of me. My parents were very proud of me. My in-laws were very proud of me. And I always wanted more. Then I wanted to go to college, then I wanted to go to law school, then I wanted to be a lawyer, then I wanted to be a judge. And that really is my journey. And I really believe that what most people thought would be a deficit for me or a drawback for me, which is my Hasidic background, I think actually is I didn't succeed in spite of it. I succeeded because of it. So when I was going through my journey, I kept it a secret. It was Ruchi's secret. I didn't want to share it with anybody because there were naysayers every step of the way. And I shared it with my friends. We were all sitting around the table. Maybe it was like Pesach or Sukkot. I don't remember. We used to get together then. Our kids were little. And I told my close friends, can't be a secretary my whole life, and I'm going to go to college. And they said, well, Ruchi, what's your plan? What are you going to do? And I said, I made a plan because I didn't want to compromise any of my values. I still wanted to have children and I raise a family. I just didn't want to become a savta in my rocking chair and tell my grandchildren, oh, Bobby could have been a lawyer, but I had to at least try. And I made a cheshbon. It would take me 10 years to get through school. And my friends laughed. Said, Ruchi, in 10 years we're going to be 30 years old or 40 years old. And guess what happened? 10 years later, we all turned 40, and I was a lawyer. And then in New York, to become a judge, you have to be admitted to the bar at least 10 years. So if you all figure out how old I am, it's okay. But that was my dream. And I also had tried to prepare myself because the naysayers had said, you'll never get through college. You'll never get through law school. And even if you do, you'll never pass the bar exam. And even if you do, the worst thing was you won't remain as religious. You won't remain as Hasidic. You're going to let go. And to me, that was the worst thing anybody could predict. And I said, why? Why do I have to make a choice of one over the other? Why can't I have the best of both worlds? And that was my personal journey. So I read books, how to prepare myself. I'm going out into the outside world. Now, in the Hasidic community, we are very strict, very, very strict. And we have some rules that somehow don't make sense to the outside world. But I keep all those rules because I realize that in order to protect myself, I have to make the gedarim for myself. And I found that all these rules that some people say are so restrictive, they were like seatbelts. They protected me, so I should reach my journey safely without getting hurt. And I learned that people, at least in America, want to have people to look up to. And they are very happy that I have my safeguards. So I was campaigning for civil court judge. And I had to go around to different communities and meet people and ask them, vote for me. And then I don't shake hands with men, right? And I would knock on a door on Sunday morning, and a man opens up the door with a cross around his neck. And I'm waking him up Sunday morning, and he opens up the door, and he puts out his hand, and I say, please forgive me, I'm Hasidic, I can't shake your hand, but I want your vote, because I'm running for civil court judge. And he looked at me like, no, this woman is crazy, but you'll have my vote. So that really basically was my journey.
Fascinating, and I guess a very personal merge of different identities. So Professor Heschel, I do want to turn to you. Last week, the world, or particularly the United States, marked the 60th anniversary to Martin Luther King's famous speech, I Have a Dream. And your late father, Rabbi Avraham Yoshua Heschel, was famous for many things, but also there's that iconic photo of him walking arm in arm with Martin Luther King in Selma back in 1965. And I was reading something that you recently wrote a couple years ago about how standing up for people in suffering is a religious occasion. I think those were the words that you use. And I'm going to go from 1965 for a moment to where we are today in Israel. You look at Israel today. Do you feel that we as a country still stand for that? We as a people still stand for that?
So let me begin. Thank you, Yedidia Stern, for inviting me to contribute to the book and for inviting me to be here. It's been a fascinating day. It's certainly a very different kind of discussion among Israeli intellectuals than one finds among Jewish intellectuals in the United States or in Europe. And so the contrast is quite interesting, and I look forward to discussing that when I go home with my friends, and we could talk about some of those differences. This panel is supposed to be about national and cultural aspects of the Jewish state, but actually I think we should be here to talk about moral and religious aspects. And moral and religious, in a sense, they are the same, aren't they? Can you be religious and not be moral? And that was, in fact, the essence of what Dr. King represented, and certainly what my father represented, not because was my father, but because he was representing Jewish teaching. Because my father, in which you quoted, the compassion for the suffering of other people from my father, that was the essence of what it is to be a Jew. He wrote about it in his book on the prophets, which was tremendously influential among the leaders of the civil rights movement. And I have to just tell you, by the way, that when I was invited also to speak by Martin Luther King III for the 60th anniversary, and I was very touched, I always am, whenever I meet one of the civil rights leaders, they embrace me, they hug me, they tell me how grateful they are for my father. Let's remember, it was 60 years ago. To show gratitude 60 years later tells you what kind of a person this is. I appreciate that. It's a lesson for me. It's Musar. So my father, of course, he stood for compassion. What is it to be a religious person? What is it to be a prophet? To suffer terribly the injustice done to other people. So maybe we should talk about that aspect, the injustice. What is justice? Justice that we're debating essentially now regarding the Supreme Court here. Justice has to be for everyone. It's an inviolable principle, inviolable like life itself. Justice isn't just for me, my justice, but you have another justice. Justice is for all, or it's a meaningless idea. And that's the essence of what we're discussing in this debate in this country right now. Is there justice for everyone? So I would say also from my father, he spoke with passion, the passion of being a Jew, the passion that sometimes, as we all know, passion can get out of control. Passion, and you know I wrote a book about the Nazi theologians, passion can go in the wrong direction And that's why we need democracy. We need the passion, but we need the democracy also to hold it in check, to make sure it follows the principles of justice. For my father, injustice was a metaphysical calamity, and he took it to his heart. Death, murder, disenfranchisement, which is going on today. You mentioned my father marched in Selma for voting rights that are now being eviscerated in certain states in the United States. That's terrible. It breaks my heart for my father. And for what reason? Why? Let me say one last thing. Justice is also for women. One of the big problems for me here, and one reason that I wanted to make Aliyah, and I didn't, and part of the reason was I didn't want to subject myself to the Rabbanut if, God forbid, I needed a divorce, because the humiliation of that and the ability for bribery of a woman, the control that's in the hands of the man, which I have to tell you, historians like Bernadette Bruden have demonstrated the links between, on the one hand, enslavement and marriage. I won't go in there, but there is something. A man doesn't own his wife, and she should have the right to divorce him, and certainly if he's abusive. My father felt, and this is my last comment, that there must be pluralism, religious pluralism in Israel. And let me finally say, for the Rabbanut to restore its integrity, which it needs to do, the Rabbanut should make it as a principle throughout the country that racism is unacceptable and not in any way compatible with being a religious person.
Thank you, Professor Heschel. Ambassador Meridor, in your article in the book behind us, The Jewish State that we're here for, you write about something called Ivriut Bimkom Yahadut, which I'm not exactly sure how to translate, but basically being Ivrim, instead of, not Ivrim as blind people, but in the biblical use of the word of Hebrew people as opposed to being Jewish people. So I'm curious, and you mentioned how this could be used as a way to bridge the rift and heal the divide between Israel and the diaspora. Please explain.
Okay, first of all, thank you for having me. Let me start with sharing that I am largely driven by fear for the future of the Jewish people. And it has been mentioned here a few times today. Towards the end, people were asked, are you optimist or pessimist? I wish I could say I'm an optimist, but I won't lie to myself, nor would I lie to you. I look at our history, I look at what we are facing, and I'm deeply concerned for our future as one people. So that's a nightmare to me. When I wrote about the issue of the Hebrews, it was within this context. What keeps us together, what may unite us, and what is unfortunately more divisive today than a uniting force. And to me, with all respect for the important role of religion in keeping us together for millennia, today religion plays more of a divisive role than a uniting role. From the very fact that most Jews in Israel won't define themselves as religious, many, I shouldn't say most, but many Jews in Israel are afraid of control of religious establishment. When you look at the diaspora today among young Jews, many define themselves, I think, at the last report I saw, it was about 40% of ages 20 to 30 or something of the sort, as Jews of no religion. Let alone that many people who belong to synagogues, temples, congregations, whatever one names them, are not doing that largely driven by religion. But leaving all that aside, take one issue, okay, which I respect, the issue of kashrut. It kept us together because we couldn't eat amongst the goyim. So Jews could not drink with others, could not eat with others, so it kept us together. Today we cannot eat amongst ourselves. Okay, so we are keeping a special set for milk, a special set for this, and when we are eating without guests, we are...
Follow me, be vegetarian.
Okay, that's an option. That's an option. I'm not saying that in the context now of religion. Why did I say Hebrew? Because Hebrew represents what unites us as a people. When Heschel had the Yedidia, Micha was mentioning before, it was the state of the Jews. It was not a religious state. When in the Declaration of Independence that has been mentioned here time and again today, it was mentioned a Jewish state. It was in the context of an Arab state, and a Jewish state following the partition resolution. It wasn't a Muslim state and a Jewish state, a Christian state and a Jewish state. It was an Arab and Jewish in the national context. And when you look at where we were, where we started, Abraham was Ivri. The person who was protected by Moses was Ivri. The midwives were Ivriot. Yonah, when found on the ship, Ivri Anochi. We were Ivrim, we were Hebrews. When you look at early Zionism, early 19th century, and the 20th century, late 19th century, early 19th, everything here was Hebrew. Histadrut Ovdim Ivriim, the labor organization was Ivri. The fight was for Hebrew work, for Avodah Ivrit. Take every term. When Begin got out of the underground and made a statement, a day after Ben-Gurion made the Declaration of Independence of the State of Israel, Begin used the term Hebrew 33 times in his one speech. What did it mean? It means that what unites us is largely shared history, shared values, shared heritage, hopefully shared destiny, ethnicity, caring for each other, things that build a nation. And in intriguing the issue of Hebrew versus Jewish, I didn't think the day after everybody will call himself, I'm Ivri, I'm a Hebrew. But I wanted to bring about the notion that if we don't focus on what unites us and allow whichever what divides us, and it's not only religion, to be the source and magnet of our energy, we could self-destroy ourselves.
So just one very quick follow-up so I understand. Does that mean, because there is a movement in America, for example, to teach Hebrew, and there's charter schools and those kind of things, does that mean that you would put bigger focus on Hebrew language study for Jews?
First of all, this was not the context of what the Hebrew language was not the focus of of what I wrote. The situation of Hebrew, in my view, in the diaspora is a tragedy. Because again, what may keep us together in the future? And as I told you, that is, to me, the nightmare.
Right.
And I think we should be aware and admit that part of what has kept us for 2,000 years was the trauma of the destruction and the experience of anti-Semitism and the fear of the goyim, or of the enemies. If you want to build a future only on the strategy of we can trust anti-Semites to keep us together, that's an option. But if this weakens, then the question comes, what may keep us together? Mm-hmm. One of the things, one of the treasures that I think can keep us together is our unique language,
Yeah.
Hebrew. And the fact that so many Jews out of Israel are giving up on this treasure is, to me, a personal loss, a personal Jewish loss, but that's their judgment. But it's a tragedy for the future of our nation, because a language is a critical element in a national existence. You give up on a critical element, you make the entire structure weaker.
So speaking of language, we have with us Professor Isaacson, who's also a poet, acclaimed poet here in Israel. And first of all, I think you're going to share with us a poem, a brief poem in English. But I also, the question I wanted to ask you after you read the poem is, what does it mean when we talk about culture and art in a Jewish state, as opposed to, for example, the galut, or the exile, where Jews for thousands of years, we know, created and drew and wrote and were amazing innovators. But what about here in Israel over the last 75 years?
Thank you, and thank you very much, Yedidia, and all these institutes for all you are doing, very important, including these books, and I'm very happy here to be with you. By the way, when Yonah said, Ivri ani, the end of the sentence, V'et Hashem Elohei HaShamayim Anochi Yareh. We have a trend in our society many times to quote only half of sentences. לא בחיל ולא בכוח, כי אם ברוחי אמר השם, וכו' הלאה, וכן הלאה. Now, the only advantage that I have as a poet here, then when we... אני יודע שעליך אני יכול לסמוך עליי, ואתה היית הבעיה. The only advantage that I have as a poet that when there were the demonstrations outside, and all over the year there are the demonstrations, and some of my family are going there and so on, and I'm trying to talk here or there, is that as a poet, I have demonstrations and riots all the time in my mind. So whenever there are also some riots outside, I don't mind too much. The poem that I read, I thought to read it in the end, but I bring it because of you in the beginning, is a poem that I wrote many years ago, and I think that it symbolizes a lot the postmodernism and what is happening in Israel and what is happening also in the States. The relations between us and the edge. We are so attracted by the edge. And here in Israel we have now this problem. Everybody is very being attracted by the edge. And the vast majority who want to be reasonable, as in reasonable is not only a problem of the High Court of Israel, but reasonable is a human problem. I don't know what happened to them. And the attraction of the edge, we are attracted by the edge, but we don't want to be ruined by the edge. I read it to you. I come attracted to the edge. How pleasant to be the last, but still to be. Trying a musical instrument, playing on it almost without melody, and me asking for a fate almost without standing. A man plays on the edge of a string and draws from it a note. Afterwards, he brings his body to the edge of health and still objects to being controlled by sickness. Stepping lightly, but still not flying. The words went crazy without madness. Confusion of morals while guarding closeness. How pleasant the edge for existence, how fearful its dimension. Thank you. I want to relate to your question. When we speak about culture, and like everything, I like to see the source of words in Hebrew. The first time it appears in the Bible, it appears in a very bad sense. That Moshe tells the 2.5 tribes that want to stay in the other way of the river, Tarbut Anashim Chataim, culture of sinful people. And maybe we can understand from there that Tarbut is not necessarily, and Tarbut can be a bad Tarbut. It can be a Tarbut of dictatorship, it can be Tarbut of morality, it can be Tarbut of being very egoistic. And because of that, I'm very careful when we speak about Tarbut. And one of the writers that I was quite a good friend of them, Aleph Bet Yoshua, he was very concerned that during the new history of literature, the gap between literature and morality became wider and wider. In recent or ancient romance, the question of morality, the morality of the main figures, the main heroes, was very important. Today, also in the Israeli literature, questions of morality are disappearing. Also, when we judge books, if I judge it through morality stick yards, people would say you are old-fashioned. What I think is that Jews all over the world can be, of course, very prominent, very successful, even the President of the United States, if they were born in the United States, even Einstein, and so on. But building a Jewish culture, the right culture, can be done only in Israel. Only here we deal with our public problems and we put them also in our literature, in our painting, in our music. Only here we have to think, what does it mean to be a Jewish policeman, a Jewish army, a Jewish government? All these things can happen only in Israel, only in the Jewish state. And because of that, I think that the Hebrew literature has a very big task and a very big goal. We don't keep it enough. We are not interesting enough. And you know, you before asked me regarding also ultra-Orthodox and how they look at the culture. We have from both sides a very severe problem. I'm a graduator of Gymnasia Herzliya, which is a secular high school. Today it's in the news because of the manager there, Gani, who's trying to exceed what he's trying to do. Now, I was there, I put my yarmulke on my head when I was about 13 years old. And I was the one and only with yarmulke on his head among 1,200 people. And Gymnasia Herzliya was maybe as the most well-known gymnasia. For me, dealing with literature, sorry? In Tel Aviv, I'm sorry. Gymnasia Herzliya.
The best high school in Tel Aviv, he's saying.
I'm sorry, but my high school...
He went to the one in Jerusalem. Right.
First of all, everything...
Gymnasia, Jerusalem, Gymnasia. We'll deal this, we'll sort this out later, yes.
Okay, you're right. You are better, ours is ancient. Now, and I think that this thing, that literature in Israel should come back to the dialogue with Judaism. As Rav Kook wrote in Orot HaTshuva in the end, that there will not be a real revival, a real renaissance of the Jews without the revival of the free literature. Right. He wrote Sifrut Chofshanit. So our goal should be here, and I'm relating now to you, to show that in our Judaism, many things of democracy are relevant, many things of moral are relevant, many things of philosophy are relevant. It couldn't be anymore all the time this debate between democracy and Judaism, because Judaism includes in itself many things of democracy.
Thank you very much, Professor. And just, I think I mentioned this before, but Ambassador Meridor is now the chairman of the National Library, so obviously literature is very important, naturally. Judge Freier, I do want to get back to you. I'm curious, first of all, I want to ask you a different question, but I'm curious if you have some response to some of what was said here, because there was some talk about Jewish identity and the role of religion, and I'm wondering if you, as someone who's very religious, in her political identity also, as you told us the story of the guy with the cross and not shaking his hand. And I know, for example, now you're on the Democratic ticket. You're up for election because you're acting on the Supreme Court of New York, but you're running now for a permanent spot.
I actually won the primary, so I was one out of the 6 that were nominated.
Right.
There'll be a general election in November, but that's really just like a rubber stamp. It'll be like pick 6 out
So
of 6.
basically you got it already. Okay.
Well,
Congratulations. So again, this contradiction or this clash, do you have a response to that?
I have thoughts.
Okay.
First, I want to just say that what you said about your father marching with Martin Luther King, I want you to know that I personally have experienced discrimination by my very own people because of the things that I have done. And I'm sharing it with you, but I don't always share it wherever I go. I'm sharing it with you because I feel I'm in a room of people who really care about issues that are confronting us as Jews, and therefore I want to share with you what I experienced when I ran for the Supreme Court nomination a few weeks ago. And so I don't know how many of you know that I'm a volunteer paramedic and that I direct a volunteer women's EMS agency in Borough Park called Ezrat Nashim. Now, unlike Israel, where women serve in EMS, women serve in the army, in America, or in New York, in the Jewish community, all the real good emergency responders that existed until I came along were men. And they saved thousands of lives, and they were wonderful. And we almost like worship them as heroes of our community. And a couple of years ago, more than 10, I was asked as a lawyer to advocate for a group of women who wanted to join. And I had no idea that this was even an issue in our society. And when I listened to it and I heard what their issues were, I said if I went to law school for this cause, it was worth it. As a side, I forgot to mention that when I went to law school, I made my deal with God. And because I was very afraid of what the naysayer said, that I won't remain Hasidic. And I said, dear God, help me get through law school without compromising my Hasidic values. And when your children come to me for help, I will help them. And that is the reason why I respond yes to any time I get invited to a Jewish event or a Jewish request for help. It's because it's my deal with God. I can't turn back. So I became an EMT and a paramedic because I felt I had to help these women. And I had no idea how upset the men would get, even though the rabbis supported me and privately said, Mrs. Freier, it's a great idea. But when it came to the politics of it, I was there in the line of fire, and I had to stand up for these women, and I did. So what happened was, the political leadership in my neighborhood is all connected with the men. And when I wanted to be a judge, I didn't want to go into politics. I wanted to be a judge. I didn't realize that I would have to run and be political. So I can only be political when I'm running. It's all part of the rules that govern judges. So here I am. I'm very proud that I became a paramedic, and I'm very proud that and I did it, by the way. The reason why I did it was not because of feminism, because I believe women are given a pedestal. We don't need a secular concept as feminism in true Judaism, because what determines your Jewish identity is who your mother is. So I think God gave us the highest place in Judaism. So I did it because I felt that for tzniut, if a woman wants a woman responder when she's having an emergency and she's giving birth in an emergency, she has the right to have a woman respond. So I upset some men in my community. And when I wanted to be a judge, they wanted to stop me. But I had a lot of support outside my community. And the reason why I won this election is because I had very strong support in the African American and Latino communities. Sorry? The voters for the Supreme Court nomination, not the general election, which is the rubber stamp, they are called district leaders. Now, so Brooklyn is divided up into different assembly districts. So you have an assembly member, and each assembly member has 2 district leaders, a male and a female co-leader. This year there were 42. 42 people were voting on who was going to be the Supreme Court judicial candidates. And you had to get their vote. And because of the way Brooklyn is structured, you had many that were from the African American Latino communities. And I really got to know them. And they understood my rules. They didn't shake my hand, but the women hugged me. And they really understood me. So I was saying then, and I would tell you that in your father's memory, the bridges that were built between the Jewish community and the African American community, I was dancing on that bridge. I wasn't walking, I was dancing. And what I learned from that experience is that sometimes you have to walk out of your Arba Kanfot and make friends. And sometimes people who you never thought would be your friend can become your biggest allies and supporters. I had African American district leaders make events in churches, and everybody was expected to go. And here I'm busy telling them, I can't eat your food, but please vote for me. I can't shake your hand, but please vote for me. And now I can't go to your event because it's in a church. But Rachel, I could go into a synagogue. Why can't you come into a church? And I said, because I cannot go to any other house of worship. I can't go to a mosque either. I can't go to a church. But I'll stand outside and I'll say hello to you. I'll sit in my car. I'll go on, I'll do, like on WhatsApp, I'll do FaceTime with you. And they saw that I was genuinely religious, but at the same time respectful. And what I learned from my experience is that we all can do the same thing. We all can be successful by dealing with people who we think are so different than us, because really we're not different. And if I had to encapsulate relationships, basically going back to my chinuch as a girl from Beit Yaakov, all human relationship is divided in 2, right? We have Ben Adam Lamakom and Ben Adam Lachavero. And in my vision here, what I see what's going on here, Ben Adam Lamakom, I would say, Hinei lo yonum v'lo yishan shomer Yisrael. God loves you all, and He will not forsake you. And He knows our challenges, and He knows our problems, because God created them for us. But from every challenge, we can grow stronger. And my challenge that I had, that my own Jewish district leaders were afraid to support me because of the politics. Right. Does that make sense? Usually, the religious candidates would get an easy open door because the religious people would support you. But it wasn't the Hamon Am that was voting, it was district leaders. So typically I would go and say, hi Henry, hi Jordan, hi Joanna, I want to run for the Supreme Court. And they would say, who's your district leader? Let me meet your district leader and hear all about you. And I would say, well, I don't think my district leader is going to support me. Well, then why should I support you? I said, because you have to hear my story. And I had a black district leader say to me, you're going to get our support because we know what discrimination feels like. And I said, but I'm not discriminated, I said. Judaism doesn't discriminate against me, just a few people who do. And at the end of the day, I learned from my experience. I overcame it.
Right. So it's a very positive way of looking at discrimination. I think that probably there's a lesson there for everyone. Professor Heschel, you were recently at President Herzog's speech at Congress, and I'm sure many people who watched saw as he called you out, and there was an applause. But it's no secret that you've also had some criticism over the years of Israeli policies. A few years ago, you signed a petition warning against annexation of parts of the West Bank. And I'm curious today, when you look at the rift that's going on between Israel and the diaspora, do you think that when you see our political system and what's happening here, can this be fixed with the political situation the way it is?
Yes. Yes. Let me first say that I was deeply moved that President Herzog phoned me and asked me to come to the Congress. And I went there, and it was one of the most thrilling experiences of my life to see all of the Congress stand up and applaud over and over again for Israel. That was amazing. And we're applauding for Israel and for the Jewish people. And I think, what other country receives such admiration from Congress? I feel terribly grateful, and I had tears from this experience to watch this. It was very moving to me, and I have enormous respect, of course, for President Herzog, and enormous gratitude. I guess I would just say, I know how hard he works and how much he is striving. I was at the demonstration Motzei Shabbat in front of his home, and I thought it would be wonderful if he would come out and just greet everyone and remind us that he is the president of all the people, regardless of someone's political affiliations or views. That would be very nice. But I would say, you know, my father spoke to the World Zionist Organization here in Israel many years ago, and he talked about Galut. And he said, you know, of course, as an American Jew, I live in Galut. He said, but Galut, what is Galut? He said, you know, some bar mitzvah parties are Galut. He said, Miami Beach is Galut. He said, the failure to speak out against racism is Galut. Why? Because Galut, he said, is a spiritual condition. He said, when Israel celebrates Yom HaTzmaut with tanks and guns in the streets of Yerushalayim, that's Galut. Is that what we stand for? That's the problem. So perhaps we need some reorientation. Of course, my father was Zionist, but I think in a different kind of way. And, you know, earlier when Micha Goodman was talking about Theodor Herzl, I'm not sure he read Alten Neuland, and he's welcome to come to the modern Jewish history classes I teach at Dartmouth College, because Alten Neuland is not about what Zionism can do for the world. Alten Neuland is about how in Israel there should be like Vienna. There should be, if you've read it, you know, in the afternoon there should be kuchen with schlagzahne cake with whipped cream, and then you put on an evening gown and tuxedo and you go to the opera. And all of the service in the home, who serves you the cake, and the Arabs, the Arab servants, they'll be the servants. Well, that's not a message for the world. That's an unfortunate book. It's not a book that I would present to my students as a model. This is what Zionism contributes to the world. So I don't understand that, but he's invited to my class. Anyway, I think this question of what is Galut and what is Zionism seeking to overcome? Today, yes, what do we want to overcome? The tensions with Palestinians, of course. I wouldn't want to live like a Palestinian on the West Bank or in Gaza. Horrible. I wouldn't want that life. Who would? Nobody would. The responsibility isn't 100% on our shoulders, but we have some responsibility. And we need to work on this. And that's why people come in outside, people who really don't know anything about Israel or Zionism, people who don't know. They say, what about these Palestinians? What's happening? And that needs to be addressed. And that would be the kind of galut that we also need to overcome for Zionism. And I would also just say, you know, the OECD that does a ranking every year of gender equality, Israel's dropping. We're now at the lowest level. That's a problem. I don't think that feminism is something secular that's imported to Judaism any more than nationalism is something that's imported to Zionism. It's okay, it's fine. Feminism is about, and I have a book coming out that I wrote with Sarah Imhoff called Jewish Studies and the Woman Question. We interviewed over 80 women about their experiences in the field of Jewish studies, and we found a lot of instances of harassment, discrimination, abuse. There's rape. Rape. That's what feminism is about, ending all of that. That has to stop. So I see it's also, by the way, issues of gender inform how we think about the world. How we think about the world. We have to overcome the sense that one is the master and the other is the underling. Yeah?
So, Ambassador Meridor, we do have you, and I want you to put on your ambassadorial hat for a moment, because it would be amiss not to ask you also about the political situation and the tension right now between Israel and the United States. And you were ambassador, correct me if I'm wrong, when Netanyahu came back in 2009, as prime minister, and did have his first visit with President Obama then. So you saw also how quickly a prime minister is invited to Washington, how that's not happening now. And just in everything that we're talking about, there's the political tension, but there's also the Jewish tension between the different communities in Israel and in the diaspora. Assuming this government's not going anywhere, it's only going to get worse?
I think this should be put in a broader context. I think that there is definitely a challenge of the current events. And, but still, I wouldn't like to make it look as if only what happened here over the last 8 months created the challenge of Israel-diaspora relations. It added to it, it did not create it. If things were to be resolved tomorrow completely in Israel on this front, the challenge of Israel-diaspora relations will not go away. We're living very different realities as Jews. And it's natural. We live here in a Jewish majority society. We live here within Jewish sovereignty. We live here where Jewish rituals are part of the national calendar. We talk Hebrew. We walk the land of Israel, everything. And Jews in the diaspora, in different circumstances, in different countries, communities and sizes, live as a minority. They're organized in a community, etc., etc. So we may be living very similar as Westerners, but our Jewish lives are very different. And I think that the core challenge is how do we create, how do we build, how we strengthen those things that may keep us together. Because the natural forces, I'm afraid, may drive us apart. So this is the broader context. Current events, I think, add to accelerating this process, to making it more severe. But admittedly, with all my concern for Israel-diaspora relations, I'm afraid that what we are doing to ourselves now could break the Israeli Jewish society apart. And that there would not be, sometimes I think that it's easier to create relationship between Jews on the right in the diaspora and Jews on the right in Israel, Jews on the left in Israel and Jews on the right, on the left in the diaspora, than keep us together as one people. And this is why, if we don't stop killing ourselves, it looks to me like I'm hopeful it's not an autoimmune disease. We are crazy. Like we are focusing largely on what can kill us domestically, instead of saying, stop. You know, I have 9 grandchildren. Sometimes they're all coming to Shabbat tables. There are debates on different issues. What is my main concern as a grandfather is that everybody walks away from the table with love for the others, no matter what the opinions were. What do I care if this one is right or if that one is right? I cared for the family. Mm-hmm. And people here forgot that at the end of the day, it's not about whether I'm right or you're right. It's about having a family.
I thought you were going to say you mostly wanted to make sure they come to the library, but okay. Professor Isaacson, on that note, the culture in Israel today, with the government, and I'm sorry that we're kind of ending in more pessimistic tones, but culture in Israel today with the far-right government, very ultra-religious, ultra-Orthodox, but even among the Tzionut Datit, or the party that has taken hostage that term and does not really represent, but that's a separate issue. the culture's changed, right? It's not the same culture that you spoke about before of what it means to create culture in a Jewish state.
Thank you. I will say in short sentences. First of all, from family perspective, as the judge described her family so beautifully, I want to say why I'm optimistic. Because from my side, from one side, I'm from Tzisling family, and Aaron Tzisling was the one to argue with Ben Gurion not to mention God in Megillat Ha'atzmaut. And from the other side, I'm Mazie, who was the leader of the Hebrew committee here in Israel, one of our first doctors. And we have integrated family. The second thing that I want to tell you, the culture in Israel suffers from many years. Now what is happening with this government, of course, makes it worse. But for many years, we suffer from some artificial culture. We have a big crisis in humanities, which we have all over the world, but in Israel, I feel it more, of course. And people do not understand that to be a better doctor or a better engineer or a better, I don't know, you should know also Bible and philosophy and history. What was very, very clear-cut in the past. Now this government, of course, doesn't deal with it too much, but I must admit that for many years we have this problem. The last two remarks, you mentioned the Tzionut Datit. I didn't come from the Tzionut Datit. I came from what was called in Israel Tzionim Klaliim, but as Salai knows, but my late wife, who passed away 5 months ago, came from the Tzionut Datit. And you should see my children, my 7 children. When you talk about Tzionut Datit, people here are totally misled. We have now very poor representative in the Knesset. But the Tzionut Datit is much bigger than that, much better, much interesting than that. You have thousands of people of Tzionut Datit who read literature, who go to the army, to the best units, who are involved in everything. You have Yedidia. I'm not saying myself, I'm not so good. But around, so when you speak about Tzionut Datit, people around here in this room, I must ask you, be more fair. Of course, we have some people who are crazy, but we have crazy people all over the map. All over the map. It's not also the same Labour Party. It's not the same left. When you speak now in the Labour Party about Zionism, about Jews in the Galilee, about things that were obvious to Rabin and Peres and Galili and Golda, they will throw you away. The problem is not only in the Tzionut Datit. And the last thing that I want to say, that I think we should all share, sure me, I many times fail in it, we should be much more humble. Our politicians and our philosophers and our thinkers, all the time we think that we know everything and we are so decisive and we are so know what should be done, and most of the time I'm mistaken. We should bear it in mind. We are many times mistaken. And I remember that once before the withdrawal from Gush Katif, I heard one rabbi who spoke in Bar Ilan University in a very firm way. It shouldn't do it, and you shouldn't do it. I don't know if he was right or wrong, but I came to him afterwards. And this is only a symbol. I asked him, dear Rabbi, you know much more than me. But if somebody will come to you and will ask you whether this chicken is kosher or not, you will check and think, and you know, and you will ask about. Here we are being asked about the policy of the government, about the fate of Israel. At least think some more. At least check some more. At least don't be so determined. And this problem is not only the problem of Rabbanim.
On the note of being more humble, I think that's a great way to end and to stick to our time limit of 7:45. But for a think tank to be more humble, this is a place of thought. So thank you very much to Salai, Miron, Susannah, and Rachi Freier. Thank you very much. And thank you to everyone for coming.
תודה רבה לך.